On January 6th, there was an interagency deputies meeting. The deputies recommended at that time that they go ahead. It was so easily approved, it was sent straight up. The conclusion was at that time to hold for what they called a moonless night, which by calendar wouldn't occur until then President-elect Trump was President Trump.
That is what the Trump administration is describing as the process that led to this disastrous ground raid in Yemen that led to the death of a U.S. Navy SEAL, the injuries to 3 others, and the killing of multiple civilians, including children. But when he talks about that meeting on January 6th, that interagency deputies meeting, he's talking about real people who are still around and can answer for themselves. And one of the people who says he was in that January 6th meeting says the Trump administration is characterizing it in a way that is absolutely false. Joining us now is Colin Kahl. He's a professor at Georgetown in their School of Foreign Service. He's a former deputy assistant to President Obama, and he was national security advisor to Vice President Biden. Professor Kahl, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Great to be with you.
I recognize and I appreciate that a lot around this discussion is sensitive and or classified, and you can't give us all the details. But within those parameters, can you tell us what's different about your understanding of the green lighting of this operation? What's different about your understanding of that compared to the way the White House is characterizing it?
Yeah, I think it would help for your viewers to just step back for a second and recognize that the United States has been engaged in counterterrorism activities against this group, AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is a deadly Al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen for years. We've mostly been doing that through drones and airstrikes. We've had a very small number of special operations forces at times on the ground in an advisory role, not at all in a combat role. And so, sometime before Christmas, the Pentagon came to the White House and basically asked for expanded authorities to allow our special operations forces to take more direct action, that is to do raids against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in support of some of our coalition partners also engaged in that fight. So we had a discussion at the deputies level, which is the sub-cabinet level right below the principals, the cabinet secretaries, which then make recommendations up to the president. We had that discussion on January 6th, as Sean Spicer noted. The Pentagon basically outlined their request for a general set of authorities that would allow them to do this and also to put some additional forces into the field. But they did not brief a single specific raid. They did not brief a target, a compound, or what we call a CONOP, a concept of operations. And the deputies made no decision. Basically, since we were so close to the end of the Obama administration, the recommendation by the deputies was to simply provide the information to the Trump team so that they could run a deliberate process. And that recommendation went forward to President Obama, who agreed that he wasn't going to jam Trump in the last week of his presidency with a major escalation in Yemen, that this is something the new president had to own and run a process for.
And when you say that specifically, when you say the recommendation was to provide information to the incoming administration so they could run a deliberate process, is that a term of art? What do you mean by deliberate process?
Yeah, so we ran a very careful process where basically in the Situation Room, senior officials from all the different departments and agencies, the Department of State, Department of Defense, the CIA, the Directorate of National Intelligence, USAID, the United States representative at the UN, we'd all sit around and basically discuss pressing issues of national security. When our military is involved in combat operations or counterterrorism operations, if they request an expansion of authority so that they can do more, put more boots on the ground, take a more active role in a combat situation, that's precisely what we debate around the table. The deputies then make a set of recommendations basically to the cabinet, who then make a set of recommendations to the president, who oftentimes convenes a National Security Council meeting to discuss it. That's how we ran the process. That's not how Trump ran this process.
In terms of how President Trump did run this process, we don't know very much about it. We are told in terms of the timeline that his national security advisor briefed him on the plans for the operation one day, the next day at dinner with his senior strategist, Steve Bannon, and with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and with the Secretary of Defense and some other principal-level personnel. He made a decision around the dinner table that it would happen, and then it was launched immediately. Is that seems like a remarkably informal, small, quick process? Is that totally out of keeping with the kinds of processes that you've seen around potentially deadly raids like this in the past?
Well, It is unusual, especially in the context where a raid like this represents a significant escalation in the nature of our actions in Yemen. So it's not just the raid itself, it's that there's a broader set of authorities that are behind that deserve deliberation. And what I mean by that is, you need to have not just the Defense Department around the table. You also need your intelligence professionals so that they can vet the intelligence to make sure that they agree with the risk assessment the Pentagon is making. You also need the State Department at the table so that they can go through the political implications. What happens if civilians die? What are the implications for tribal relations in Yemen or diplomatic relations? You need the communicators in the room so that you know that you're on message and you can coordinate with your allies. You also need the legislative team in the room so that you can notify Congress. This is a deliberate process that you owe the president a holistic assessment. And the problem is, even if you've got a bunch of smart, capable people around a table at dinner, like Secretary Mattis, who I think the world of, and Joe Dunford, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who's an amazing man, you need a fuller picture than those two gentlemen can provide for the president to make a decision of this gravity.
Colin Kahl, professor at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, former deputy assistant to President Obama, national security advisor to Vice President Biden, and somebody who has provided us a window into this process that it bothers me in terms of the way the White House is characterizing it, if it's at odds with the reality that you live. Thanks for helping us understand this, sir. Appreciate it.